Zoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app here in Indianapolis on Radio Row, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980, where you see Lance Zierlein, whose work, Lance, when I've been teasing you coming on this week, I've said you've read Lance's work whether you know it or not. Now, some people might read your mock drafts and stuff, but if you go to NFL.com and read like the player bios, that's you.
That's me, and some people will aggregate it. Some people will quote it in articles, and they'll say from NFL.com rates this guy. Well, I do. I don't necessarily speak for Daniel Jeremiah or anyone else, although if they were smart,
you clearly
they would
speak
just
for the
take
entire
mine.
league, the league office,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
You got the shield on the shirt.
Yeah.
No, it's always been great. I think you always do such a good job of kind of laying out the pros and the cons of different players, and that insight's always really helpful for those of us that are playing catch-up, who spend our most of our days covering the NFL during the year, and then it's
hard
like,
to transition from NFL to college.
Yeah.
Man. It's a quick turnaround.
It is, for sure. So the other thing that people might not know, unless they've read your latest mock draft, is that you, sir, are now all of a sudden an exception when it comes to the Washington Commanders and that second overall pick. Everyone has seemingly swung back to Drake Maye, but your latest mock that I saw had Jayden Daniels going to 2. Are you generally a Jayden guy over a Drake guy? Are you I think it's a better fit? Like, why?
No, I'm
why
a Jayden
Daniels
guy
to
over
2?
a Drake guy.
Okay.
I just think the tape, I listened to the tape, and I don't think that Cliff Kingsbury would dislike either one of those quarterbacks, but I think the polish, we're talking about a 5-year starter in Jayden Daniels. He's just more polished. I think he's worked out some of the kinks over his 5 years. He is a legitimate dual-threat quarterback, and the rare dual-threat quarterback that is, about as talented throwing the ball as he is running the ball. Most of them skew towards the run over the pass. He's that guy that kind of balances it out. So, if he was 220-some-odd pounds, I think we'd be talking about Jayden Daniels potentially as the number 1 pick. But he's not. He's a thin guy, so you have to work through him being a runner and who leaves the pocket a little quickly sometimes and doesn't always slide. So you have to work through that. But I think Cliff Kingsbury will take a look at Jayden Daniels and what he does as a passer, and I think he'll come away with the favorable review. Drake Maye has a lot of talent and a lot of traits, but there's still work to do with touch, with accuracy, and that bothers me a little bit when you're throwing in space to moving targets. You need to be able to throw with better ball placement and especially better touch.
Yeah, it seems like his footwork gets a little sideways sometimes, too. He just loses it for stretches of games, where Daniels seems to be a little bit more on time. I've tended to be more of a Jayden guy throughout this process as well. And the one thing that I think also a lot of people poke holes in that I'm curious to get your take on is the lack of throws over the middle of the field. It's so important in the NFL. And I'm like, well, if I had the 2 dudes that Jayden's got on the outside, I'd be throwing it out there too. Do you see enough of that on tape, though? Do you see enough of the stuff over the middle of the field that it doesn't bother you?
You got to remember, I use a program where I tie I've got, the quadrants of the field. So I've got intermediate throws. So I will go, one of the first things I do will take all the intermediate throws. So I'll look at everything from 11 to 20. And I look at all 5 sections, outside the numbers, from the hash
right.
to
numbers
the numbers,
to hash,
and then
hash to
hash to
and
hash.
then other side.
So I look at all 5. So I'll look at all those throws. So whether he did it a lot or not, I'm going to go look at all the throws he did make. And those are some of the throws that bother me. He left a lot of throws behind wide receivers, throws that need to be completed. They're not the hardest throws. He struggled on some shorter throws with taking a little pepper off of his throws. And so for me, it's those are pro throws, in my opinion. Those are the anticipation throws you get. Those are the throws where you're getting crossers and dig routes where you have a little smaller window to work with. You got to be able to work between linebackers and safeties. And I think it's one of the reasons I gave Drake Maye a boomer bust grade is that, I don't see it enough right now, but it's not that he can't do it. If he does do it well, he's got a chance to really boom.
And what about,
he's got a lot of talent, but the floor is a little lower on him.
What about for Jayden in that intermediate area?
Jayden's it's not a problem for him. Now, he had some special wide receivers with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors. He actually had 3 really good wide receivers. So he had a lot of talent to work with, more so than Drake Maye did, and that's a legitimate focus that some could make, is that, like Josh Allen, who anytime there's a big guy who has accuracy issues, just, Josh Allen, he'll be fine, Josh Allen.
Right.
Josh Allen's like one of one.
Right.
Him and Cam, I guess, are the only 2 that really fit that mold. But Jayden Daniels, I saw throw with good anticipation between, in the zones. I thought he did a nice job of getting through his progressions with with pretty good pace, which is something that I didn't always see from Drake Maye. And I think on tape he was clearly the much more polished quarterback. Now, if we're going to draft everyone based on who they are right now, Jayden Daniels goes ahead of Drake Maye. But I'll be the first to admit, it doesn't really work that way with a lot of teams. Right. They want to know who you're going to be in 3 to 5 years, not who you are right now.
Right. Lance Zierlein is with us, of course, NFL Network analyst. You can read his work at NFL.com. Has some other cool stuff going that we'll tell you about here in just a second. When it comes
what
to –
do you like watching? You obviously watch these guys.
Yeah.
Let me turn the tables on you.
Okay.
When you're watching players for Washington, first thing I do for a mock draft is I got to go find team needs. And I typically look at fan sites and newspapers locally because they're going to have the better feel than me looking at a roster. I also look at, also teams. I look at future cap implications because that does play into some drafts.
Sure.
But when you look at Washington this year, I assume you're looking at quarterback. Who are your next 2 positions that you're looking at?
It's the trenches, and it's on the edges in the trenches. It's tackle, it's edge. And that's kind of a thing that I've started to think more about this draft. I wonder, do you try to go for one of each at 36 and 40? Do you think the gap is big enough? And I'll turn the question back around to you that I've answered it, yours. But is like a Tyler Guyton worth trading up for? And you go 2 for 1 there, where you package 36 and 40 to get back into the back end of the first round for a tackle, or something. Whether if you don't like Guyton, someone else in that range,
Mims.
Or do you go, hey, we're gonna take the best edge available at 36 and the best tackle available at 40, and we'll live with the results there.
So it's a precarious spot. It's great to have those picks because you could package them up and move up. There's no question a team would love to take those off your hand. It would probably be, it probably wouldn't just be 2 seconds to move into the first. It might, involve a team giving you back a 5th or something like that. But,
sure. Hey, we'll take more picks.
Well, so here's my thing. You got some really special pass rushers in this draft. There's 4 or 5 of them in the first round that I get excited about, and there's 6 offensive tackles I get excited about. So if you could somehow take those second-round picks, and you almost can't get out of the quarterback draft. You almost have to take that quarterback at 2. You're stuck. You could trade out, but you'd have to have some balls to do that and you'd have to really love, for example, maybe a J.J. McCarthy, and you say we're gonna gamble.
Or you just don't like any of them.
Yeah,
and you're like, hey, this is a wild card anyway. Whichever one I get, I get.
Well, you can't just draft a quarterback because you need one, because as Brian Billick once told me, as soon as you draft a quarterback in the first round, it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 22, immediately the clock starts ticking on your job, whether you're a general manager or a head coach, because you got to develop that guy into the next guy. And if you don't believe in a player, you get stuck with them. Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers are now stuck with Kenny Pickett, and he may turn into a good quarterback this year, but he's going to get a 3rd year. So you now are kind of stuck with a quarterback for at least 2, and in most cases 3, and in some cases 4 years. And Chicago's sitting there thinking, man, do we want to go through this and try to figure out, is this the year Justin finally does it? Every single step, you get closer to a 5th-year option, which is much more expensive, and then have to make a decision on a second contract. So if you don't love your quarterback that you're going to draft, now I think at 2 they will, but if you don't love your quarterback, you really shouldn't pass up a good football player for a guy that you don't really love. You're passing up a guy much higher on your board for a guy at a position of need. That doesn't work out well usually, and it definitely doesn't work out at the quarterback where there's a historic, miss rate.
So if I'm telling you, okay, they're going to go the 2 swings in the second round.
Yeah.
Which of those? I think
I'd rather get into. So I'd rather get. The first thing I'd want to do is see if I could move 36 into the first, and take tackle or pass rush if one fell beyond 23. At Texas, with the Texans. Okay. I'd want to do that. And then I'd love to see it if I could. I don't know how many draft picks Washington has this year.
Many. And they got 5 in the top 100.
5 in the top 100. Listen, I'm playing games with my first 3 picks. I'm going to get 3 guys that are what I would do with my top 5, with my 5 picks in the first 100. I'm looking to get a pass rusher, a tackle, and if that means 3 in the first round, you don't love it from a future cap implication standpoint in 4 to 5 years, but I also am getting really good football players, and I'm getting big-time core players. You don't see teams make, 3 picks in the first round very often, but I would definitely consider moving 40 up into the first round for a tackle and then sitting there at 36 and see when I get it. at the edge rush. So, yeah, I'm using my draft capital, and I'm going to get the first 3 picks I want to be longtime starters for my team.
Yeah, and I tend to think that that's the way that Adam Peters wants to build it too.
Well, you look at the San Francisco model. I mean, you always have to look at where they came from, and he covets rush, he covets D-line, playmakers. So I wouldn't rule out playmakers for this team because, one thing Cliff Kingsbury is going to want are guys, and there's certain guys that fit. You can look at you could look at wide receivers in the second round. I mean, they could sit tight and look at Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall from Florida. I mean, there's a lot of different Javon Baker from UCF, and then Jermaine Burton from Alabama. There's a lot of guys, Adonai Mitchell, that Cliff would probably love to have with his quarterback. So that's another position that you could say quarterback, wide receiver, and then best of tackle edge.
And with this class of wide receiver, if all the edge trench guys are gone, you feel good that there's going to be a bunch of wide receivers.
Second, third round, great depth at wide
sure.
receiver.
For sure. Lance Zierlein, of course, NFL Network analyst. You can see Lance on Combine today, which streams on YouTube and the NFL's Fast channel Thursday to Sunday, 1 hour prior to NFL Network's coverage each day. Lance, this was great. Hopefully we'll connect in the future. Appreciate you. And thanks for stopping by here on Radio Row.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Enjoy the draft.
Thank you. We continue from Indianapolis next.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.